hands of people who are already members of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. All right! Wow! Wow, that's awesome, that's powerful. And to all of those who are here for the first time, really welcome you and believe that you're here because you want to change this world, because you want to say that we're not passing this down to the next generation, that we're going to do everything that we can to change this world. We're going to struggle, we're going to be out there, and we're going to raise reparations to African people. And I also want to salute Comrade KC, who is a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and also a member, leader of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which is the mass organization of APSC, and APSC is an organization of the African People's Socialist Party, led by Chairman Omale Shatella. And I want to salute KC, Comrade KC, because she is going to be going to St. Louis, working on the front of the Uhuru Movement there, that has been built especially since 2014, after the police murder of Mike Brown and the resistance of African people that we saw there. And the Uhuru Movement has a powerful base there that is the the headquarters of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, which is the mass organization of the African People's Socialist Party. And it is also building powerful institutions in Uhuru House in St. Louis and the Jico Kitchen and many other things that you're going to hear more about. So it's very exciting, and I just really want to salute Comrade KC. They're amazing organizers. I also want to salute some of the comdads, as they're called, that are here tonight, some of the fathers, Terry and Clyde, that are here, Kelly and really appreciate you. Just want to say that. And I want to salute Akile Anayi, who was just such a powerful, powerful people's candidate for District 6 City Council, and many of you probably saw it online. Bold, courageous, powerful representative of the African working class, Akile Anayi tonight. And my comrade, also a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, a leading member, Jesse Neville, who ran for mayor, the people's mayor of St. Petersburg, Florida, who ran on the platform of unity through reparations. And staff. Very powerful. And of course, I want to salute Chairman Omale Shatella, under whose leadership I have had the honor, as a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, to work, to be organized for the last 41 years. So we'll talk about that a little bit more soon. But I do want to welcome everybody to the Day in Solidarity with African People. And this is something, as has been said, that we hold every year. This year we've been out in Oakland, California. Of course, we've been in St. Petersburg, Florida. We've been here in Boston. We're going to be in Brooklyn tomorrow night. We're going to be in Huntsville, Alabama. And we're going to be in Gainesville, Florida. These are some of the places that we're going to be this year, and we're very, very excited about this. And, you know, we feel that this is a period of time when we as white people can begin to hear and answer the call of how we rectify our relationship to African people and how we can take on what it is that we need to do. And that's what we're really going to talk about tonight. And I want to say, first of all, that the Day in Solidarity with African People is a tribute to African people from the white community, from the white population. It is a tribute to the genius, to the science, to the arts, to civilization that was given to us on this planet by African people. It is a tribute to the humanity of African people, to the constant, endless struggle that African people have led for the last 600 years to end all forms of oppression, to build a world in which all human beings can live, no one at the expense of anybody else, to rectify this world, to end this white power, and to create a world without war, without injustice. And to say that the African People's Socialist Party is the highest expression of that, the organized African working class that is fighting to reunite and liberate Africa and African people all around the world, and that Africa is the homeland of all African people everywhere. And it is also, the Day in Solidarity with African people is also an acknowledgement. It is acknowledgement of the fact that Europe was poor, Europe was under feudalism, and that the only reason that we as white people have resources, that we have prosperity, that we have opportunity, even the experience of democracy in the society, is based on the reality that Europe came out of the caves and assaulted Africa, beginning in about the 1400s, that turned African human beings into the first commodities of capitalism, that turned human beings into a means of production for sale, as a sale value, as a use value, as Karl Marx would say, that this is how the system started, that it started with untold violence that continues on until today, and that it's talking about the fact that African human beings were enslaved, were packed up in ships, were worked to death, often with a lifespan of 7 years. That was the greatest amount of production that the world has ever known. It created the greatest wealth that the world has ever known. And also that Africa itself was assaulted, and still is today, with all of its resources being taken out. And when you look at, the kind of thing that happens in Sierra Leone, where all of, there was those mudslides. But that wouldn't happen. In fact, when African people have control of their resources, their land, and the value of their stolen labor. And the Day in Solidarity with African people is also an acknowledgement that it wasn't just some abstract government that did that, but it was white people, it was our ancestors that did this, that acted as the colonial state, that lynched, that burned, that raped, that tormented, that enslaved, that dehumanized African people so that we could raise our children, so that we could climb up the ladder of success, so that we could sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people. It is an acknowledgement of that this is how we got to be where we are. This is the story of this country, and in every rebellion and every struggle, even every police killing that we see against an African person in this country, underneath the surface, this question that slavery and genocide and the assault and colonization of other human beings, the majority of humanity, is boiling and roiling under the surface of this country, and it can't be reformed away. It can't be changed. It can't be legislated. It can't be unracified. It is there. It is a material reality of this country. And so it acknowledges, the Day in Solidarity with African people acknowledges that we as white people sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people. And it doesn't mean that we're Bill Gates or the Rockefellers or anything like that. But it means that even as we might be workers or women or LGBTQ or environmentalists or whatever, that we have united with our own ruling class, the ruling class of white power, to continue the oppression of African people. We have participated in the genocide against the indigenous people very, very enthusiastically as a people. And we have participated in the U.S. government's assault on the majority of the people on the planet Earth who've been lived under colonialism, lived under wars of occupation, carried them out in our name, which we were gladly willing to give our name to that. And the Day in Solidarity with African people is an apology, but it recognizes that there's no apology without reparations. There is no apology without reparations. We can't stand there and say, oh, we're sorry. Can we all get along now? No, we can't, because we're still sitting on the stolen resources. And we're sitting on, we are the colonizers. And the Day in Solidarity with African people is also a commitment. It's a commitment to struggle. It's a commitment to say that we are going into the white community under the leadership of the African Revolution. We're going to acknowledge that the struggle is against colonialism. It's a political and economic state power that operates in our name and with our participation, and that we do benefit from economically. We are the colonizers. We are the colonizers. We are the children of the slave master facing the children of the enslaved. And these are the responsibilities that we carry, And until this contradiction is resolved, there is no way that the future can unfold. And that there is no ability, as we say, to reform this system because it's in its DNA. They talk about, oh, well, we're going to struggle against the Confederate statues. But what about, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson? They were Southern plantation owners. They owned hundreds of enslaved people. They were the template for the South, the Confederacy. They lived in Virginia. They were slave owners from Virginia. So this is what America is. This is what America is, and this is what we have to remember. This is what we have to take on and take responsibility for. So the African People's Solidarity Committee was formed 41 years ago this month in St. Petersburg, Florida by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and that, as has been said, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who began as a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the 1960s, tearing down a hideous mural inside of St. Petersburg, Florida, has been struggling ever since. He dedicated his life to one thing, gaining power in the hands of the African working class and freedom and liberation for African people everywhere. But this movement of the 1960s was defeated by a program that was a counterinsurgency. It was called COINTELPRO. It was responsible for the assassination of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and it destroyed militarily the movement of African people in this country, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party, because we are socialists, by the way. Because we can't, capitalism has to go, and we have to have a world in which all human beings, but we can't be socialists because we say we are, or because, we live in Denmark or something, and we say that's socialist because Israel says it's socialist. No. We're saying that we are socialists because we're under the leadership of the leading force against imperialism that is struggling for power in the hands of the African working class. And that the chairman he created a political theory called African internationalism. He created a strategy to win everybody he can, including African people inside the borders of the United States and around the world, to understand that the independence for African people, just like the Vietnamese called for, the anti-colonial struggle of African people is key. It must be supported by every freedom-loving person. And I just want to read something really quick. This is an incredible book by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. It's called An Uneasy Equilibrium, and it's referring to the balance of power between the colonized and the imperialist, between the past and the future. And this is how we can see and how the chairman has defined the world today. And the chairman says in this, he says, "We have never been diverted from our mission of capturing power and uniting Africa and our nation under the leadership of the African working class." So that's what he's saying, that their struggle is to capture power. And he said, "We determined long ago that characterizing our movement as a struggle against racism is a self-defeating waste of time." And you're like, huh? What? Aren't we supposed to be struggling against racism? But no, because the chairman tells us, he's saying what is called racism is simply the ideological foundation of capitalist imperialism. Racism is a concept that denies Africans our national identity and dignity rather than defining the system of African oppression, the chairman says, it relegates African people to the Sisyphean task of winning acceptance from and often becoming one with their oppressors. So in a certain way, if we understand this, one of the most racist things that you can do is say that the struggle is against racism. Because what does that keep us in the center? And that keeps this system in place, intact. You know, has anybody been watching the whole series of the Vietnamese people that's been running on the public TV? Oh, you have to watch it, please do. It's very powerful to see what the Vietnamese did. They kicked the ass of the United States royally, and it is so powerful. And this is what the African People's Socialist Party and the struggle of African people is about. One of the reasons that the Vietnamese could be so successful is because at the same time that they were struggling on their home ground, that African people were struggling against their same enemy inside the borders of the United States. And they understood that very clearly. And that the question is that, you know, there's an interview, there's a little place in one of the series, in one of the weeks of the Vietnam series, where a Vietnamese man who, you know, was still alive back in that, you know, back then, he was an older person, and, you know, he said, well, the French, because France colonized Vietnam for 100 years, and he said, oh, the French, they don't even treat us like human beings, you know? But he didn't say, well, therefore, we want the French to unlearn racism. We don't want them, you know, therefore, we want the French military to wear body cameras. He said, we want our land back, and we will fight you until you have to leave, until you die. We will be free. Yes. And they were willing to go through that. And that is because it was the question of colonialism. And colonialism gives us a way out. If we're struggling against the ideas in our head, can we ever change that? I don't know. We do have these ideas in our head. That's part of colonialism. Of course we do. But the fact is that struggling against colonialism, it is a political and economic system that can be defeated. We've seen it. The Vietnamese did it. Others did it. It can be defeated under the leadership of African people in alliance with other colonized people who rest inside of this pedestal that is this system's weakest point. And I know that my time is up. My time is not up. I have 1 minute. Okay, so I just, you know, I want to say that this is a very important point because this is what distinguishes this movement from something else. It's not a feel-good movement. It's not where we can go take a weekend on unlearning racism and go, whoop, no, I'm good. Because when we do that anyway, what Africans are still being gunned down by the police. You know, the prisons are still stuffed with African people, and we still go home to our tree-lined streets. And now my time is up. But I want to say that the white population in this country is in a crisis because imperialism is in a crisis, because all around the world and inside this country, African oppressed and colonized peoples are fighting back, and the U.S. can't do with impunity what it expects to do to the oppressed of this planet. It has to pay a price for that inside this country and around the world. And that as white people, we can see that suddenly white people are getting massively addicted to heroin and opioids. And, you know, of course, when drugs were imposed on the African community by the U.S. government, it meant that, you know, millions of African people were sent to prisons. White people don't get that. We get treatment, you know, for this. But, you know, we know that white people are committing suicide in huge numbers, have anxiety, have addiction, alcohol, you know, all of these contradictions, which are even lowering the life expectancy of the white population, and that we do have a way out of this. We can join the people on the planet Earth. We can end our self-imposed isolation from everybody else. We can end and and get rid of our relationship with US imperialism and white power. We can end that once and for all under the leadership of the revolutionary forces of the African working class and be part of building a new world. We don't have to be at odds with everybody else, and it is that creates all the anxiety and fears for white people, and we don't need to do that. We need you. We need all of us to do what we're supposed to do inside the belly of this beast, in solidarity with African people, in solidarity with all the oppressed people on the planet Earth, and in our own interest to be part of a planet in which all human beings can live. No one at the expense of anybody else. Uhuru.